Hi, welcome to Cubs and Culture, and finally, since I have access to the DVD, we'll be turning to The Shape of Water as a direct review of it. I'm willing to assume that if you're watching this video, you've watched the others. So, as always here in Cubs and Culture, I make these videos basically for fun and educational purposes. I'm going to do my best to keep the clips to an absolute minimum. But this is fair use because I'm providing commentary and criticism of The Shape of Water. I own the DVD. I recommend that people go buy the DVD, etc. So obviously, since I spent a lot of time talking about Shape of Water to begin with, it is my favorite film of all time. I'm very glad it won Best Picture. So I want to actually begin by talking about some interpretation things on how I interpret sort of the ending. So spoilers. Okay, so the ending, everything up to Strickland shooting the creature and Eliza, and then I think even up to the creature jumping into the water with Eliza in his hands isn't any sort of controversial. But after that point, there's three different. You're watching Del Toro, by the way, accept his awards. That's why I have some images here. This is the Golden Globes. So there's three broadly possible ways of interpreting the ending, because Giles is narrating over and he says something to the effect of, I believe this is what happened, or I believe they lived happily ever after, blah, blah, blah. So it could be, in its sort of its most realistic sense, that the creature and that Eliza just died, and the ending of the slits on her neck opening up and becoming gills, and they living underwater didn't actually occur in the story. That it's a wish fulfillment, or a wish on Giles's part, etc. Because he is an unreliable narrator. The movie implies he's sort of that he was an alcoholic because he's asked by presumably his partner at one point if he was still drinking, etc. Plus the use of the word "I believe this is what happened." So there's that. So that's sort of the most, let's say, materialistic ending. Then there's another ending that you interpret the creature actually gives her, that it does happen. What you see is correct. What you see happens, and Eliza is given gills, and that she is, this is the Oscar now, is for Best Picture, and that that the creature, the god, or the amphibian man, whatever, gives her gills, and he just happens to use the scars on her neck as the slits for the gills because they were convenient. Then the third sort of interpretation, because you don't really know why Eliza is mute, but she's found by a river, and she's had it since she was a baby. These 6 scars on her neck on either side. That it's not actually to be. So you could also interpret it as she's not a human being. She's the female version of the amphibian man. And he doesn't give her gills. He heals her sealed gills that happened when she was a child. Of the three, so one of the reasons why I really like this movie is all three endings are relatively well supported by the text, and I think the movie's asking you almost sort of as an article of how you interpret the world, or sort of your article of faith around fairy tales or magic or whatever. What sort of ending do you want here? So if you're more skeptical and cynical, you'll say, oh, it's just Giles being a wish fulfillment. Or if you are sort of deeply romantic, where they're meant to be like soulmates, you'll probably go for the third ending. Now I think it's actually the second ending, where Eliza's given gills, as opposed to having her gills opened up, because this movie is founded upon the notion of loving the other. So it's really important that Eliza's actually an other from the creature. Otherwise, the entire central theme is undermined. And I like that you can interpret it all three ways, even though you should interpret it the second way. Okay, so that's going to be sort of the interpretation points. The other sort of thing about interpretation that's a little bit weird to me, and I'll put some links down in the description, that not just the right, but people on the left have been trying to interpret Eliza and the amphibian man getting together, because they do have sex over the course of the story, as sort of bestiality, which is very, very weird to me, because as you just saw, that's Guy in a romantic situation with an alien from Galaxy Quest. This is Kirk in the more recent movies with an alien woman having sex. And then the next image is going to be the original Captain Kirk. And I have never heard of the trope of bestiality being raised in the context where a man has sex with a feminine animal creature, alien creature, or an alien. And the thing is, the amphibian man is clearly sapient in the course of the story, because he learns ASL, he learns some ASL. He's clearly a being of intelligence and self-awareness. So there's that. And so it's weird to me that everyone's like, is this movie promoting bestiality? And it's not just the right complaining about it. With that being said, it's kind of interesting that the creature is designed to be sexy, because you're trying to have a movie about loving the other. There's kind of a great irony in the film that the amphibian man is an other, but he's designed after like David the statue, and so he's still sort of humanized in that way. And so there's this great sort of tension about how far the loving of the other goes, and so there's something like if you watch the film, Del Toro seems both fascinated by this sort of relationship and then also sort of repulsed by the concept, because he still designs the creature to be very, very classically handsome. Now, I think the easiest way to proceed is to talk about sort of the three main aspects. So the first one up is going to be Strickland, who I think is something of a post-fascist. It's really significant if you look at the three villains in Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, and The Shape of Water. They're all sort of along different points of sort of a life cycle. So in Devil's Backbone, the guy has a girlfriend, but he doesn't have a family, and he's not married. And the the Pan's Labyrinth, he has a kid on the way. And then for Strickland, he does have a kid. And so the thing about Strickland is, again, to sort of use the metaphor of the film, he's so sort of submerged and surrounded by fear of and hatred of the other that he doesn't even realize his sort of ideological commitments. And so that's what I mean by him being a post-fascist, and that fascism is so imbued within this character that he doesn't even realize what he actually is. And then the other sort of thing is, and I'll show you the couple of scenes that the scene that he's sort of obnoxious about this, and then he ends up being chewed out by the system. And so this whole thing about his fingers turning black, it's not that he's turning evil, it's that to show him literally ripping a part of his body off and casting it aside, because he is so deeply committed, so deeply submerged within sort of a fascist society that he doesn't even quite realize what he is. And he has to cast out weakness in this way. Then the second other aspect, of course, I'm going to show a couple of scenes for Eliza and the creature amphibian man. And the thing about this relationship is, it isn't just a love story in the sense that they get together. It's actually held up as sort of idealized sort of relationship. So one of the things that's really, really interesting about this movie, and it's portrayed from the beginning, where Giles in narration says this is going to be a story of love and loss, and then the point is reinforced because one of the first story beats in the film is that there's a chocolate factory on fire, and Giles says tragedy and delight in the same instant, which is setting up, sort of really setting up the ending, because the ending is not a happy ending. because even in the second interpretation, Eliza and the creature end up together, and that's really happy. But then the other major relationship in the film, Eliza and Giles, is over and done because Giles loses his friend. And so this sort of thing that's really interesting about this relationship, it's very sweet and very, very tender. But it is sort of held up as this very idealized relationship. And then a lot of the things around like gender is very interesting because like the creature is damseled and the woman has to rescue him, which is really kind of awesome. And at the end, when he gives her gills, it's not, I interpret that as two lovers saving each other, etc. There's that. Now, as a mute character, Eliza, of course, sort of stands in for disability, then also being a cleaning woman. That's about class, because what this film is really talking about, and I think it won the Best Picture. It's also something that a lot of films don't, a lot of people haven't really caught up on, is the movie is about intersectionality, which is, if you're not familiar with this term, it's the idea that different identities and systems of oppression interact in such ways. And so a black woman, for example, has to deal with sexism and racism. Or likewise, Giles, for example, because you're looking at him, he's a gay man, an older gay man, so he's dealing with both homophobia and ageism, which don't undercut, but changes sort of experience. It doesn't undercut the fact that he's a white male in many, many contexts, but it does mean that he is sort of captured in this way. And so the thing about Giles is, and his main sort of function, besides to give sort of the tragedy of the story, of the characters in the film, Eliza's sort of character arc, she finds happiness, she finds her soulmate. He is the character that really does change at the beginning of the movie, from the beginning to the end of the movie. And while it is very much Eliza's story, it's also Giles' story, because Giles is a guy who, in my sort of interpretation of the movie, is he's an older gay man who lost his job because of basically being a jilted lover, etc. And he spends all this time sort of retreating away from the world. This is why at the beginning of the movie he says, "Shut off the civil rights," and he doesn't quite see the point. He doesn't see intersectionality, and he grows and changes by seeing that why he has a struggle in life is why people like Eliza and the Amphibian Man have a struggle in life. And so that sort of point is what the movie gets. Now, ultimately, maybe that's a little bit soft or kind of wishy-washy and very, very sort of Hollywood-ish, that all marginalized people need to band together, or all outsiders need to band together. But I actually really like that quality, because as a fable, it allows you to interpret the movie in a lot of different ways, or apply it to a lot of different conflicts. Okay, now turning to the actual clips of the movie. The first two clips I'm going to show you are two scenes involving Strickland. He's talking to Eliza and Zelda. He also calls her Delilah, because Delilah is sort of his her middle name. And the point of these two scenes, note they both take place in the same office, and then also note that it's twice right there where Delilah stands for when he says, very casually racist. Isn't that uncommon for your people, because she's only a single child? So there's that. Interesting point. There's also sort of his overt religiosity. Well, of course, with religion and fashion connect to each other a lot. Sorry for the jump cut. They removed stuff about Eliza, which I don't want to show. The other sort of thing is this notion, in this scene especially, about divinity, what God looks like. So it works as two different ways, in that he'll eventually say, Strickland will basically imply that God is a white, it's presumably straight man, which is incredibly oppressive and everything like that. But it's also because he sort of just takes it as default that that's what God would look like, and he's and so it's really dismissive, sort of racially and oppressively towards women and Zelda and everything like that. But the other sort of thing is because the creature eventually is revealed to be a sort of a demigod or the Amazonian river god, and he very much doesn't look like human. It sort of takes it to a little bit further. Now, the second scene, which is coming up right here, is this conversation with him, with a general, where the point of this scene, and this is what I mean, this is the scene where it really becomes sort of like a post-fascist in my mind, because he gets chewed up and spit out by the system here, because the creature at this point has been rescued by Eliza and Giles and everyone, and he did fuck up. But he's been loyal for 13 years, and the general sort of just casts him out because he had one mistake. This is repeated later on where he actually rips his fingers off and casting out weakness from the body. And the thing is, this isn't him. He's actually hoisted by his petard here. No one betrays him. Everyone follows the rules or follows orders. And so, like, the only person he can be really mad about is himself because he's so bought into this sort of system. Now, the other sort of thing I want to briefly talk about this is there's a Soviet character in the movie, Dmitri or Dr. Hofstetter, and that kind of brings up intersectional issues with national origin. But the thing is, the most evil line in the movie is actually not uttered by an American. It's actually uttered by the Russians, which is, we don't need the Americans to we don't need to learn. We need for the Americans not to learn. And so there's this notion that institutions or the system oppresses people. So it's not that Hofstetter is not like, it's not like the film is sympathetic to Soviet Union or communism. It's again, it's sort of nationalism. Okay, let me think that's pretty much it for these two scenes. Now, the next couple of scenes are going to be moments involving Eliza and the creature. Let me just hold up. I gotta say this. I really like this use of the word decency. Okay, so this scene, it's going to only be like a couple of seconds, is the introductory scene for the creature. And the thing I like about it is because it is ultimately a love story, and this is the two lovers meeting for the first time. It's like he's captured in a tank, and it's just really bizarre that this is the way it's introduced. And the thing I like is really how Hawkins plays her here. Is she's innately curious, and she's not afraid of the other. She's drawn to the other, which I think it was very, very much. It works sort of with the love story, but it also sort of works as sort of the main thematic point. The other thing is, I gotta talk a little bit about the production design here. Those pipes in the back really do make it feel like a 1950s laboratory. Okay, so that. Okay, so there's this other scene, and she keeps bringing him the creature for eggs. And this scene is playing music. And one of the things I really like about this is there's sort of an intersectionality things where it could feel like just him Del Toro going down a checklist. The thing is, the muteness of Eliza, I think, really works romantically for two reasons. One, Del Toro has admitted he's not good at writing romantic dialogue, so he doesn't have to write a lot of romantic dialogue. And two, as you'll see here, the creature picks up right there. He picks up music, the sign for music, immediately, which shows great sapience and intelligence and self-awareness. And the thing is, by making him mute and teaching him ASL, because of the use of the subtitle, really brings home the sapient quality of the character immediately. And so this scene is very, very sweet and touching, but it's doing more than, it's not just sort of romantic scene. It was also doing exposition about the creature's level of intelligence. And then this is my favorite little moment in the film. This is after they rescue her, and she brings him a card, and it's not only just a little bit tender, it's also a little bit awkward because he's not a fish for one thing, but the image on the card is a guy holding a fish, which is a little bit patronizing. So it's a little bit amusing. So anyway, I think as much as the last shot where they're underneath the water is going to be remembered, I think that little moment of her holding his hand is really what's going to be you are going to think about. Okay, so this is 2 scenes with Giles. And again, talking about the dialogue with writing doing more than one thing, him telling this little story, well, the meaning of the word tantalizing, not only sets up that he's gay and sort of has a romantic or erotic infatuation with this pie server, but it also shows sort of his education, his cultural level, and then also sort of establishes that he's a bit of an old queen. I have to say this is at this point when I first saw this movie, when I heard him telling this the meaning of tantalizing. I've actually had this conversation in real life. So it was at that point I realized that Giles was basically another version of me. And I knew I would absolutely love the film for that, for no other reason. Now, the other sort of thing is I really do like how Richard Jenkins plays him, because he is effeminate and an older sort of archetypical gay man, but he's not just an archetype. And he plays this romantic infatuation really, really well. And the point I want to show this is something of a bad fantasy on Giles's part. There's the probability of this guy being gay is incredibly low, and he sort of gets himself to sort of believe that he is, as you'll see in the next little bit, where he seems like he said he recognized me or I'll come back, and the guy's just trying to sell pies. So there's that. Now this scene is where the intersectionality really comes forward, because Giles is going to make a pass at this guy, get rejected, get kicked out of the restaurant. Then at the same time, an African-American couple is going to come in, and it draws the parallel between Dixie Doug, that's the character's name, and that's not his real name, anyway, the restaurant. Between his sort of racism, casual racism and casual homophobia, which is a pretty standard intersectional point. Now, the thing I really like about this is it's at this moment that Giles realizes that his own sort of impression is related to the things he was saying to turn the TV off of, because he's been trying to ignore the civil rights action. Okay, so the last little bit I want to say about these clips while it's playing is I don't know if this is intentional or not, because honestly, this guy could be he could have been a soda jerk or a bartender. It doesn't really matter to make the point, but he selected pies, which I think is a reference to actually a couple of the gay rights cases that I've talked about, the fact about wedding cakes, and which I think is really, really cool that it is sort of that specific. At the same time, I think in 20, 30 years, it's not going to come across like that. So in the end, one of the reasons why this is my favorite movie of all time is not only is it just beautifully crafted and absolutely gorgeous and emotionally involving and everything like that, is as a fairy tale or a fairy tale for adults, it doesn't really have, it's meant to be an allegory and partially about Trumpism or sort of post-fascism, what the moment now in politics, but it's also, I think, eventually going to have what Tolkien referred to as a great applicability, that even though Del Toro has said it's about now, as in 2018, 2017, in 20, 30 years, it's going to not, we're going to find new meanings, because there's always, unfortunately, there's probably always going to be an other. So this is going to be my last bit talking about Shape of Water. So hopefully you've enjoyed these several videos. Again, I'm going to try to do better. I feel like I've just been droning on. The last little thing I want to say is a lot of people on the left are upset that Shape of Water won over Get Out. And I don't again, I really like Get Out, and I would have been okay with it winning Best Picture. It would have been a very worthwhile winner, and it's very, very biting and everything like that. I have a fear, though, that Get Out is going to end up it seems almost destined to age poorly, because either race relations are going to get worse, in which case it targeting mostly progressives and moderates is going to feel misplaced, or race relations are going to get really much better, in which case the movie's going to the satire is going to get dulled. So I think Shape of Water is going to age better than Get Out. So anyway, go see this movie. See it. It's a great film. That will be it for Cubs and Culture for March 19th, 2018. See ya.